Morning.
Hello.
Good morning,
Hey,
everyone. Morning,
you two are always first on.
Tammy, are you working from home today, or like will you be going
I
to?
will, if you had gone, if either of you had
Okay.
gone to Powerhouse, I would go. The rest of my meetings are remote anyway.
Okay, it's
So
fine.
I'll just stay out of the way. It's really cool that what they do. You should see it sometime, but it does create a something of a hazard. All those kids. It's really exciting.
Uh-huh. It's nice.
So they do Kidwind, they do Energy Week in June. So they have a like boys and girls clubs coming. And I don't know if you know, there's a guy at Energy Institute. What is his name? Mike? I don't know if you've met him, but he it is now in charge of K through 12 outreach. So we can expect to see a lot more things like that.
Mhm.
Yes, I met him. His office is opposite you.
Yes.
Not
Mhm.
exactly, but
Mhm. Hey, there's Kartik.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
All right. I think I can never tell if Christina's coming because I know she has now another position. But then, and then let's see if Narasim is generally in charge of these
She's
meetings.
on the email, so she should
Is she?
technically
Okay. Did he invite Shang Wei? No, he didn't.
know.
Okay. Well, I think we need to loop Shang Wei in.
Yeah, I know Nasima was mentioning that he was going to give an update about that. So
Hmm. Oh, you're here.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
You got reviewed. Did they throw you out?
I got reviewed and I got thrown out.
Good. Now you have more time to work.
I'm nervous because I was unusually candid in my review and complaining about certain things.
Oh,
But
yeah.
hopefully it won't come back to bite me.
Well, I hope they take it seriously, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I love my dean. I love my dean. I told her that at the end of the meeting. I love her.
It's a dean review, huh?
The dean reviews, yeah, all the faculty.
Wow.
No, not for you.
No, just the department head.
What's the difference?
Because you're like in a school, right?
Yeah, because we're a school within Yale, so there's a dean of the school.
Yeah, so maybe it's a
Probably
similar,
the equivalent of their department head in a, yeah.
yeah. So we have a dean over all the departments.
Right. Dean of Engineering and Science or something.
It's engineering, and then natural science is a different
Oh, okay.
thing.
Yeah,
There's like 8 colleges that are full of departments.
yeah.
But I think if the dean reviewed the faculty, he wouldn't do anything else, right?
Right. I mean, you must have
It's
tens
only-
and tens of faculty, right? Yeah. So we
Um,
have, 33 faculty, and she sits and goes through everyone for one day. Yeah. Anyway, so looks like it's just us. Christina's not coming, I guess. Let's do updates, go round. Yeah. I guess I'll start and pass it on to Tammy and then Raidul, Karthik, and then Zara. So I just, oh, there's Christina.
Hi there.
Hi, Christina.
Hello.
We just started. We were just chatting until now. we're going to just go around and give an update as to where we are, what we're doing, and bring up any issues that we wanted to. So yeah, I am very determined to make progress on the review, do a little more writing this week, later part of this week, and then spring break starts, so hopefully we'll do a little more. Otherwise, the main other thing I wanted to mention is the plan. So Shangwei came here to Yale, and we set him up with NEMS. So we have got him running NEMS. Looks good. Now the challenge is code modifications. And what's really interesting is that this is another topic to cover in the review, is that it's not so simple if you want to make a change. You know, sometimes you encounter a major structural change to the entire code of the model. You can't do it, you know? So just to bring heterogeneity, oops, this is kind of urgent. Can you hang on 1 second? I'm really sorry.
It's okay. Christina, I just wanted to comment. I think you're the only person whose Zoom picture looks exactly like when you come on. I don't know how you do that.
That looks exactly like what? Like,
It looks exactly like your face. Like there's
oh,
not
yeah.
like, you know, it's for me and for others, I think it's like your picture's taken in a better place or a few years ago, but
Mm,
yours looks like it's just yesterday.
yeah,
Your
because
hair
for
is the same.
yeah, for the visa, they always ask for a picture that's less than 6 months old.
Oh, they do.
They're really strict about it, yeah.
Oh, well, I never paid attention to that. Okay, back to you, Narasimha.
Sorry, very sorry. So yeah, we have NEMS running, and we are trying to simply figure out if we can add, like, make two income groups. So just any kind of segmentation of the residential sector. But it may be very, very difficult to do. So that's where we are. We're looking at, he's going to now investigate the code. We also want to change the retirement rate algorithm to add our age distribution. And we want to play with that bias factor, which seems to be a static sort of disadvantage to heat pumps. And we want to be able to take it out and see the effect of that.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that if all of a sudden we made the policy environment conducive to heat pumps, you know, and considering that heat pump sales now exceed gas furnace sales, the model is not reflecting that change in people's perception. So we want to allow for that, even though it's not very bottom up, it's at least some representation. So yeah, I'm hoping that we can implement a couple of these changes, and that would be kind of a top-down chipping away at this big legacy model, as opposed to working on something bottom up the way Raidul is. So I think it'll be an interesting contrast, and I'm excited. And Shangwei is very, very motivated to do this because he needs to publish a bunch of papers for his career. So I'm very confident that we'll come out with something pretty soon. So that's it. Nothing much more to update. My unresolved issues are the same that I presented on Friday, which is to what extent to cover the energy conservation literature, but I don't have any more to discuss right now. I need to go back and take a look and see if I can make some judgments. And when I have some judgments, then I'll share those with you and get your feedback.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. So I wanted to add to what you said. The reason I've been harping on the rules, which I think you know, on the principle of the rules, is that not just this, but I've just been in a couple of different modeling communities by now. Just because my life has skipped around, right? And it's the same in every modeling community. So I've been in the Earth System Science community, and it's like, everyone says their model can do everything, but in practice, when you put it in, then comes some bug and it wasn't meant for that. And then the version goes on, and then, you know, you need a dedicated person to manage that. And same with the aerosol modeling community. There were so many, it continues to this day, and I will try not to make this a rant, But so for those of you who are newer in this field, I used to do a lot with black carbon aerosol emissions. And so the way the IPCC works is they take those models and they just take an average and they're like, well, the models are complicated, so everybody's probably right. You know, we can't say who's wrong. And when we wrote our a sort of long assessment paper, I delved into those models and I was like, oh, some of these people are making these really wacky assumptions. So find out ways to normalize for that, and then you get a different answer. But then I think one of the things that caused me to not really, I felt like we'd done a pretty good job at that. But then the whole field just kept on, like, next IPCC, oh, we averaged all the models, right? It's like no improvement. And so I feel like if you're going to begin laying the groundwork for a new field, you have to deal with that. You have to deal with this, what's the word, this like human instinct to just make a model and then have it be valid. And instead, I think people need to get down to the nitty gritty of like what is making the models different. So I know I keep harping on this question of the rules, but it's something that I see as very limiting to convergence, right? That once you have not expressed your assumptions, you can no longer converge, right? There's no opportunity for convergence, only averaging. No fun.
Yeah, I mean, there's one substantive discussion about the nature of the rules and how whether or not they represent reality, or at least the literature that we understand about reality. And the
Mhm.
second is what you're talking about, which is more of a research process kind of a critique. And that's I feel we should definitely have some text dedicated to that in this, maybe a paragraph. But I almost feel, Tammy, this is a great long-term critique to bring in people from an IAM community, you and the atmospheric modeling community, and then the household modeling, and have a broader review of the process for the energy climate space. I think it would be really valuable if we want to think about doing that, towards the end of the year, whatever.
Yeah, I think so. We can talk more. I didn't want to take over this meeting by talking about that. I would like to see some discussion of it in your paper. I very often feel like, oh, this is applicable to everything. I want to talk about everything. But then it becomes difficult to write a bounded paper and then have people take it up as actionable. And so there's kind of a sweet spot in there where it's broad enough to be of interest to more groups, but not so broad that people can't get their teeth into it.
Yeah. I mean, I see that too. I think when you find commonalities across different modeling communities, then it really makes it powerful too. So that's the advantage of looking across atmospheric modeling, climate modeling, energy modeling, and find very similar things happening. Then you are really talking about a cultural problem, and that's really powerful and impactful. So I see, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree. Let's keep that discussion going and figure out where the right place is. I've also written a few papers that took a long time. They were supposed to be broadly applicable, and then they were rejected because it's like, I didn't do, I didn't discuss in detail each field, or which would be impossible.
Yeah.
So there's
So anyway, you
again,
can help with this. I'll start drafting something on this, and you can help with it.
I'm happy to do that because I'm really I can be quite efficient at writing things that make me angry. So that is one driver.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so happy to help with that. Okay, so where I am, in the past couple weeks or 3 weeks, I would say I've made almost no progress. My goal is at least on the cohort model. And that is just because I've had a huge number of administrative stupid things that I hope have passed, but you never know. So I'm just the usual things for you postdocs, like don't get a professor job. It's just, you can never, I thought it would be a great thing to do. Like I could have a bunch of people to do my work. Instead, I spend all the time doing administrative stuff and being on committees and searches and anyway, so nevertheless, I will also say that I've had a little bit of a conflict in this project because in addition to the cohort model, I'm also working on the well-being review with Ellison, and I have a piece of that, and the participatory system mapping, which we just did a week ago Friday, and we'll report on this Friday. And so I'm finding that I have very little bandwidth for creative energy, and sometimes it gets taken up by one of the other things in this project. So that's an excuse. My hope, though, is that Raidul and I found that the cohort model and the agent-based model work very similarly with some differences in emphasis. And so Raidul's moving forward. And so the project isn't stopped because of that. But I do think that it'll be a nice comparison to have the cohort running. And the progress has been made. It's just much slower than I wanted. Right. First it was end of January, and then now it's end of February. It's running, and I want to produce an age distribution. My goal is February 29th, and I did not make it. So I can be in the hall of shame.
It's totally understandable.
But I don't want it to be understandable. I want it to be done.
Well, I really think that, if one of them, even if it's the ABM with simple rules that are new, can show some results. I mean, he's already got something functional and mechanically, so that would be fine. I don't think you should feel any pressure to complete the cohort model now, because hopefully there'll be in the next phase as well.
Yeah, never tell me not to feel pressure.
Feel pressure, Tammy.
Yeah, and I think I will say that I have wavered on developing it because I feel like it's going to be replaced with the ABM or whatever. But I do find that thinking about its structure, which is what's taken all the time, has been useful for like how to communicate rules, ways that we might want to communicate rules. Because I have everything I think I've mentioned. Nothing is hard coded, right? Everything is laid out in CSV files. And so you can look at what the rule is, you can change the rule. There's a distribution rule to choose different technologies. And so that can be easily changed, and then you just run it again. And even if that model itself does not persist, I think that thinking about how a model should be presented is a useful exercise.
So one other thing I see with it, I think that may be valuable, even if it's not this big model that's achieving what you wanted it to achieve in the first place, is that you're developing modular functionality that will be useful for one of the models. So for example, okay, you're working on the age distribution based on real data. And I think you should coordinate with Changwei, by the way, because
I
that's what
will, yeah.
he's doing with NEMS. So then we will have that, and that will produce for the US the stock of available buildings every year, right, for heating choices. So that's something that's a functionality that's there. Then the second thing is from Zara's work, we're culling out from the ResTalk data some representation of the archetypes for building shells that we have to ultimately put into some model and combine with the socioeconomics. That's going to be really useful too at some level, so that's one functionality. And then Raidul is developing the ABM, which is going to then include rules for interaction or behavior. So I think if we present these as elements of modular functionality, it may be useful even if it's not all put together and running.
Well, and my dream would be to have, so I've got, for example, one thing I just did last night is you create a file that describes the functionality of selection among different options for a given house agent type. And it has a function. And so one of the things my model has is a bunch of different functions that are really flexible. If that CSV file could be used the same between my program and Raidul's program, like I would consider that a programming win, because that's hardly ever done, right?
So what's in the CSV file exactly?
It's a description of the function.
Okay.
So I have a bunch of different functions, right? But you just say, I want this function. I want a logistic function, for example. Then there's a certain way of describing parameters of that function. And you can have like an infinite number of parameters. So it just goes through, and those parameters can be taken, or the value of the parameter. I don't know if this will make sense. It can look at the heating system or the house or the owner or the government, right? So all of it, it'll just look up all those things, populate them for that one instance, then calculate the value of the logistic, and then that describes how choice occurs. And it doesn't have to be a logistic. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And right now they're all the same, right? There's no, it's still toy, but they all have the same logistic function that describes how they're retiring, for example. But it could grow to include the cost once I have it from Zara, etc. But it's a single line. So it'll have like, for this house, this is the description of the function.
So you keep saying logistic function, you're using a logistic function
And right now I am.
for the retirement.
What?
For the retirement? How, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean,
it's
it's just an S curve, right?
so it's the uptake, not the,
Well, it's the other
retirement.
way. It's a retire.
Is it the same as a Weibull function? Because that's very commonly used.
It isn't Weibull. You know, when I did vehicles, I did a lot of comparison of Weibull versus logistic, because logistic fits the S curves that people use. And my sense is that statistically, you cannot tell the difference between the logistic or the S curve and the Weibull function. Actually, logistic is not the S curve. That one has an exponential in it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
I like logistic functions because they have some really nice properties.
Yeah. Like an elasticity.
Well, and they're easy to differentiate. So if you have if you have like a retention, then you can easily differentiate it and turn it into a retirement, if that makes sense at all. Like if you know how many are remaining, but bottom line, I can argue for the logistic function, because at one point in my life, I came to really liking it. Okay, but that doesn't have to to mean that it's valid. But I couldn't tell the difference between whether something was Weibull or whether it was logistic.
I mean, that's actually an interesting nerdy question anyway, about a model being open to, that different functions for the same data, and showing that it doesn't matter in these circumstances, it matters in that circumstance. Because to me, the survival rates almost always use Weibull functions, and I don't right now have my head in it to just tell you this is why they do it, but it's interesting in and of itself. At some point, that'll be interesting to bring out a little bit. Logistic versus Weibull for survival
I know
rate.
that the European fleet model uses a Weibull function for vehicles.
Yeah. And the Lawrence Berkeley for the heating equipment as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
I have not seen the evidence. And I know Weibull is associated with failure, so that makes it a promising. There's another one. Oh, it's for emissions though, the gamma distribution.
Yeah, the
Um,
gamma distribution is a little different. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah,
But yeah, so that's a dweeby conversation.
it is. It is.
They tend to differ around that little cup where they leave the asymptotes. Anyway, let's let other people talk.
Right, though.
Yeah, I can
Natural
go.
order of things.
Yeah, thank you. So before I formally start, so I have a question for Tammy. So the CSV file that you mentioned with the variable data description, when you describe those rules, there is a specific structure to this description, right? Or is it like random specific?
What do you mean?
Like for example, the way the ABM can read is that, okay, go to each of the word and we can make say that pick third or fourth word or value and take that as an input of the parameter.
Yeah,
Something
it's exactly like that.
So yeah,
So it's three parameters. One is the coefficient, one is the variable name, and one is a letter identifying where you find it. And that where could be in the technology, in the home, in the agent, the actor, not agent. And then there's a global scenario variable, but that can be sort of very flexible. So there's 3 parameters and then it starts over, but then you can also put in what I call tags that are special. They can be other descriptions, like if you have a function that takes a weird scaling
Yeah.
or something.
So yeah, it can be done. I don't say easily, but yeah, it should be possible. So other than that, for the last few weeks, I have been working on two fronts mostly. I was working with Narsima on the review paper on understanding how ABM model is being applied to understand household level decision-making process in the context of heating system. And I was working with Tammy with the ABM modeling. So initially we had a working model, but that's mostly on random value when it comes to parameterization of the actual rules. But now we are working on providing actual empirical data to make it more validated. So it will be more, the results will be more conclusive as we provide more empirical data over the times. So that's something we are working on in the coming weeks. We should be able to hopefully have it finished by the end of the month, something like that.
What data are you talking about?
Like, for example, we initially provided, like when I started coding, like for example, maintenance cost or upfront installation cost, all those some things are random value, some with a marginalized error understanding. But now we are providing actual literature data or what the NREL has providing in terms of those value to make it more realistic, something like that.
And I'd like to work with Xiangwei on this because my guess is that NEMS actually has the most realistic values of these. I'm not sure though, but I know DOE has done a lot of work on this type of thing. Whether it appears in NEMS or whether it appears in some other framework, I'm not sure, but I don't think we want to be in a position of using values other than what DOE is using, unless we have a very good reason.
Yeah, no, I'm using the DOE values. So I think they have provided statistics for like 2022 or 2023. So that's the value I'm currently using for the ABM model.
Also, I mean, there's operating cost, there's fuel and efficiency. The fuel prices, we should use the AU. But the installation, the equipment cost, I'm pretty sure what they use and what Christina was looking at and what NEMS has are all coming from this one report that a consulting agency did for them
Yeah, is it?
by
Yeah, Lado?
Navigant.
Oh, yeah, Navigant. Yeah.
Yeah. And I even know I used to work with the people who wrote that report.
Okay.
many years ago. That, I mean, there's a gross underestimate of the actual switching costs for installing heat pumps. A gross underestimate. So we may use it, but we
Okay.
should definitely do a sensitivity that reflects more realistic, especially it leaves out the installation and the the installer profit margin and the potential distribution system modification costs, which
Yeah.
are also
Said, very good
underestimated.
reason,
Yeah.
right? We can change it, but we should have a good reason, and that's one of them.
Yeah, that's the main reason. And they have a switching cost for upgrades inside the home, but even those are very low. So, unfortunately, we don't have good data on an alternative, but we can just do scenarios. Anyway, so Raidul, just to understand, is it then that your objective by the time we come around towards the end of spring that you have a model that's working with a retirement rate, an age distribution, and then for decision making for the behavior, the rule is basically an economic rule. So you're not trying to put in any other rules at this point?
Not for the first paper, I think. So I totally understand, and I will talk with Tammy in the coming few weeks too. Like ABM is vastly equipped with understanding or capturing that agent-to-agent interaction or peer interaction, something like that. But I feel that it's enough for one paper right now. We can write a paper just focusing on heterogeneous result analysis for heat pump adoption system. One of the reasons is that I was looking into literature that like peer influence is something very important, and most of the literature have covered that, but I have felt that it's more ambiguous. There is no empirical validation to capture the actual peer influence. I have some idea because I did some network science studies during my PhD, and I want to bring that to the team and have their feedbacks to incorporate that. But for the time being, I feel that we should be enough to pull off a single paper, just what we have for based on the cost-based analysis.
So like, I want to modify that a little bit. I think the first paper will be simple. I
Mhm.
don't know that it will be only cost, right? Like, or if it is, it may do something like, instead of just least cost, consider the implications for the like individual's discount rate or something, but based on their income. And so I don't want to answer you, no, Narasimha, there will be nothing but cost, but I think it won't have the extent of like input from Chris's interviews. So there's a like if the line here is like completely cost, and then over here is like all the stuff we could ever do, I'm thinking it's going to be like closer to the cost only.
That's fine. I think including a little heterogeneity and having some income groups with different discount rates is already something that none of the existing models are doing. So, and we may do that with NEMS if it's possible, but I'm guessing structurally it will not be possible. So even if you do just that, I think that's a contribution. But if you wanted to consider something that justifies an ABM, I'm just worried you're risking why you're using an ABM question by a reviewer. There's one paper in Vermont, Mansfield, Ray and Mansfield, I think, that does find a spatial density as a driver, not driver, as a having an influence on households having a heat pump in Vermont from the survey. So it would not be empirically validated, but you could have an empirical derivation, justification based on this paper saying you implemented this spatial proximity, So if, for example, if the houses that ended up being economical for, then there would be high likelihood that houses that were physically close to that house would have a heat pump than another household with the same economics that were further away. And then you would be bringing in the spatial information into your ABM.
Yeah, so
Typically-
I think once Rydul has it running, I think it'll be really well poised to include some of these things.
Exactly, yeah.
What we'll have to do as a group is decide that, again, the fine line between writing one paper for each thing and diluting the impact of
Yeah.
your papers and
Yeah.
waiting 2 years before you publish a paper because you're trying to include everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're just
Yeah.
trying to get to the first plateau where it runs and has a result. And then I think it's a discussion between me and Rydul, but also among the whole group. Like, where do we cut this one?
Yeah, and it's not only where you cut it, but what to include, because a peer effect is what an ABM lends itself to, but it may not be the strongest force driving EPUB adoption. So, that's partly on me from the review to say what are the most important factors that seem to be affecting. And by the way, that brings me to another question. Are you just doing Colorado? You're doing whole country. I know Tammy is in a cohort model, but in the ABM, are you still to be decided, the geography?
So the way the ABM model is currently structured, it can take any state as long as you provide this appropriate CSV file. But I'm running the model for we now have the Colorado population distribution only. But I have discussed with them is that as long as you produce the CSV file and replace it with existing one, it should be pull off the data and run whatever state or even the whole USA it can capture.
I have commanded Rydul to stick to Colorado, but to keep it in mind that it should be immediately or very quickly generalizable. And I think that's good guidance for a lot of us. One of the reasons for focusing on Colorado is, for example, some of the things that Ryan is turning up will only be available for some of Colorado. And so I want to leave the model available to respond to that.
I think
But
that's
then
wise.
those are immediate lessons, right? Like, well, we'd like to run the United States, but these other states, we don't have any ideas on the things that Ryan has come up with. And so what does that mean then, that we have this rich information for Colorado and not the United States? So the active expansion, I think, is also going to be a discussion.
I wholly support that, especially if we're trying to create avenues for bottom-up data to inform the model, right? That's what we're trying to do, bridging top. And then it makes sense that you do Colorado because that's what we have data for, potentially. Bottom-up data. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, it sounds great.
Okay, yeah, I'll go next. I think one of the discussions we had, I think Narasimha, you're not present in those, like 2-3 weeks ago. We were talking about this heterogeneity question, and we all came up with a bunch of variables we thought were probably important and we need to look at them more closely. So we had a Google document, and I think it had probably like 25-30 variables, and a lot of our discussions were running into like, oh, this might be correlated with that, so why are we looking at both of them? Should we just look at one of these? So we're going down those rabbit holes, and I sort of decided, or we all decided maybe, that maybe we should make a correlation map of all the variables we are interested in, just so that we get a sense of what is correlated to what and to what extent, and maybe that will help us, in sort of filtering down these variables to ones that, are not terribly correlated. So I spent some time sort of combing through the list we had and coming up with the code to make these correlation maps. So I'll just show you one. This now it's sort of a working version, but I have the code set up in order to do anything we want in the future. So okay, so I just pulled all the variables that all of us had put into that document, and I just characterize them, depending on where they're coming from. So a lot of them are coming from the ACS. So these are just variables that, you can just pull from the ACS 2019 file, and some of the requested variables were also coming in from these special surveys. So I had to use the Fuse data to pull some of these variables out. And from the whole list, I think the only things that I didn't include yet are the disposable income and the winter summer temperature variables that I think Raidul had requested for. Other than that, I try to get everything else out and just plot everything against everything to see what the correlation looks like. So what I did was for the continuous variables, I just broke them down into low, medium, high. So income, for example, would be low income, high income, medium income, similarly with expenditures. And for all the categorical variables, I just convert them into dummies. So if you had, 3 categories for a given housing equipment type thing, you create 3 columns with ones and zeros, and then you can do your correlations based on that. And then with the next slide is going to be a huge map. So I don't know if we have the time to look at it right now, but I'll just show you what it's going to look like, and then I'll send it over. Then you can dig through that in more detail. So yeah, this is pretty much everything versus everything.
Everything versus everything. I love it. Yeah, we probably need a whole meeting for this, Kartik.
I wasn't planning on discussing this specifically today, but in terms of presenting it, because I could also send over just CSV files of correlations between variables or something. So because I know Tammy and Raidul, you wanted to use this data a little more, so I'll leave it to you to decide how you want to think about it. How do you want it passed over to you and all of that.
It just looks like there's very, very few cases of correlation that one should have to worry about.
But
Unless it's really dark blue or dark red.
Right, those would be -1 and 1, right? So it depends on where you draw the line. If 0.4, 0.5 is where you start to think things are correlated.
Statistically, I wouldn't think you should worry about up to 0.5.
Yeah.
For sure, you can find enough different behaviors with respect to what you're looking at, even with 0.5 correlation. So the only concern is dark blues, which you have very few.
But there are some.
There are
So-
some,
so
yeah.
Yeah, there are some.
Correlation, right? It's not an R squared because you've
Yeah,
got, so an R squared would be even smaller.
Yeah. I'm surprised by how little. That's good. It's good because it's good and bad. It's bad because it doesn't help you narrow and rule out variables. Anyway, cool.
Anyway, yeah, let's not, I guess, maybe not waste time on this, but I could just, pass this around, or if you want another way to present this, I could also just send you the raw correlation coefficients, p-values. It's all set up right now, so it's not going to be too much additional work. Just pull it and create a CSV.
So just to understand what you fed to this correlation matrix, Kartik, is it household level or Puma level average data?
So this is national households, so it's at the national level.
Yeah, but the data points are for individual households in ACS?
Correct.
So you use the mean value?
So what I've done is, because, for example, this particular one, I have 10 implicates, so 10 different data sets effectively, and I've pooled, I've done correlation matrices for each of these 10 copies, and then pool the results to get the mean.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see.
Okay, I want a whole meeting to delve into this, and it doesn't have to be our modeling meeting. I also want to observe that I think we often do Zara and Christina last, and then they get 3 minutes each.
I
I
know.
wonder if next time we should try to counteract our tendencies and put them first.
Yes, I was thinking about that as I was saying the order, and then I said, I'll
Like
write
you and
down.
I usually babble for a while, Narsima, cutting out everybody else's time. We need to stop.
I agree.
Like strain
So
ourselves.
let's do it now, at least for starters.
Okay, I'm gonna end, and I also wanted to say, I think for the next 2 weeks, I think I'm gonna sort of switch back focus to the basic needs work that I've been working on for quite some time now. So I'm working on a story for that. So I'm gonna use, the next few weeks to just flush it out really well, and then hopefully have a draft outline by the end of the month. So that's sort of my immediate pressing goal.
And Kartik, does that exclude if Raidul and I wanted some data on heterogeneity with you? Would you be unable to attend to that? If we
No, I
get,
think I should be fine because the code is set up for any request you make. So I just need to click a button and either the variables or the correlations in the setup to be delivered. So yeah, it shouldn't be too distracting.
But it is true that I'm trying to protect Karthik's time because he has trouble saying no. And so the spring break 2 weeks from March 8th to March 25th, I wanted Karthik to be not touched by anyone. Even on our EPA project, I'm telling everybody, please don't ask Karthik for anything. So if you have requests for heterogeneity stuff, it's fine because like he said, it's set up, but just be mindful that trying to protect his time. So, but if you have stuff before Friday and definitely after March 25th, definitely, but if it's fine in between as
I
well.
don't think we'll be able to absorb what he's presented by Friday. And
Yeah,
then
yeah. So did you want to have a meeting in the next few weeks, or can you wait till third week of May? March to have the
till
heterogeneity meeting.
third week of May?
March.
March. Oh, yeah. I'm pretty sure we can wait.
Okay. So
And
let's have it in the
Kartik,
third week
I
of March.
agree with Narsima. You need to block off time if you're gonna focus and you know that you get chipped away at by not focusing, please let us help you, not hurt you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, no, I think it's fine for requests because it's already set up, so not going to be terribly difficult to get it out. So
If you want to use the Tuesday, March 26th modeling meeting, let me just make sure we didn't put something else there.
I haven't been keeping a schedule for modeling meetings.
Yeah, no, just in the meeting notes, I have sometimes noted. Yeah, so we can use that meeting if you want to discuss heterogeneity.
Okay, why don't we target that? Why don't, Kartik, if you could send this over and have Raidul and I take a look at it between now and then we can be prepared for you.
sure, yeah. That
And
should
one
be
thing
good, yeah.
you need to, if your time is getting really precious, like it does, then you need to demand that people are prepared for you and don't come with some haphazard set of requests, okay?
Yeah, sounds good. I think I'll send over the data and the presentation, and 26 hopefully should give you enough time to absorb everything, and then we can have a more directed discussion. So yeah.
So I'm actually using this modeler meeting document to put in updates. So it's relatively useful. So you can look in there. I'm putting notes for today. And I'll make a note that on March 26th, we'll have a meeting on heterogeneity.
Okay, should I go next? So I basically went through the comments that came up during the Friday presentation a couple of weeks ago. I don't think there will be major changes. I think it's pretty much fine as it is, but I do want to think about the story a bit more and maybe go towards a prediction framing more rather than going too much into the coefficients, because for quite a few of them, we kind of have the conclusion, yeah, it shows we missed something, but we don't know what. So yeah, and there were a couple of people left at the end of the meeting. And we discussed a little bit, and I think it would be a good idea to maybe frame it more as a prediction than trying to interpret the coefficients. I'm not sure if we can find a balance between the two, but I think the story is not very clear yet. Like we can say, like the prior equipment has kind of an effect, a small effect, but especially with the prices, I'm not really convinced. Like if we say, yeah, I mean, it's the biggest effect, but it's probably capturing something else. And then, yeah. So I'm not sure it's actually worth trying to interpret them in the first place. Yeah.
So when you say prediction instead of coefficients, that means you just want to look at the overall ability to predict whether a household has a heat pump or not,
Yeah.
not worrying about what's driving it.
Yeah, but then kind of leaving things out of the model, so like comparing different models and see which ones has the highest prediction essentially, and that could lead to some conclusions like what factors have an impact, right? But not so much within a model looking at the effect of the coefficients, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so if you have these multiple models from parsimonious to more, and then you have different goodness of fit, let's call it.
Yeah.
And then you can do some cross validations, right? You can base the estimation on one subset and then test it on another subset and just do that all over the place, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
exactly.
then you'll have some ability to predict. But even so, though, it still begs the question, what's driving it? And you may then need to ask, if you were to leave out these variables, and how much does your prediction improve when you include the prior equipment? How much does your prediction improve when you include gas prices? So I do think ultimately it'll be the same point, but you can frame it in terms of how well are you predicting the switch, and what is helping you make that increase that probability. Yeah, I suppose that's fine to do it that way. I mean, I don't think you'll avoid the things you're trying to do in terms of what the uncertainties you have. In some ways, it's very hard to come up with a paper where the results are a little bit negative results, but I think it's kind of important.
I think it's important.
To be
Yeah.
comfortable with it, and because you've done something unique. You've taken into account information that no one has tried to put in before, and the fact that you're still not seeing strong drivers tells you this literature is not capturing what's driving these decisions. That's a big result in my view. So I wouldn't feel shy about your model not giving you some kind of slam dunk. I think it's insightful nevertheless. And I'm fine with you framing it as a overall prediction, but I wouldn't shy away from highlighting the effect of these individual variables and what it means.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then I think I want to think a bit more about the buckets of variables, like for example, sociodemographics, because they are way more variables. So when I put them in, it's a lot more variables than, for example, the ownership variables. And that, of course, affects the fit of the model. So I feel like I need to find a better kind of equal, across buckets, equal like set of variables kind of in terms of numbers and importance. Because if I put in so many more variables, it will be a worse fit, right? So
I mean, you could use the same strategy, which is, there's two approaches I can think of. One is the past literature, certain socioeconomic variables matter, like age, gender, income, or you can do the same approach where you keep adding variables and seeing what is really driving it. If you set up your code to just run a whole bunch of these regressions, you can actually see which variables among each group are really having the most effect, and only include those when you do the combined groups.
Yeah.
I think the question, Christina, of whether you call it a prediction or something else, I think it's a really important one because I think I'm hearing you say, I don't want to stand on this. I'm not too confident in this. And so I will call it something else, but the statistics are what they are, right? And I think one issue, and this may come up in the review, Narasimha, of you and Raidul, people take things different ways, right? People have data similar to or worse than what Christina has. And then they're like, well, here it goes in the model. And so I think sometimes it comes out that people who are honest and skeptical and so on don't end up using things. But then other people do because they're not as careful or rigorous. And I guess I feel like we should grapple with, well, what does it mean actually that you saw a small effect, or that you saw no effect, or that we don't know what the mechanism is? I'm not saying that you should halt your investigation or writing, Christina, while we're talking about this, but I think that the hesitation you're feeling should be common among us, and we should really deal with it. And like, what does that mean? What can we say from these data, which are, by the way, better than anyone else has done before?
Yeah, I want to look into this a bit more, like doing the cross-validation, see what comes out of it. And then, yeah.
That's useful. Do that. Then you'll have all of the various kinds of outputs from this analysis. And then
Yeah.
you can paint a story around it, which I think will include both. Well, given that we've added more information than anyone ever has, which is dry conditions, how well are we able to predict heat pump ownership? Switching, not heat pump ownership. How well
Yeah.
are we able to predict someone switching? Nobody has asked that question in the literature from my perspective. Not a single paper has addressed that question.
Yeah.
So that's what the framing to me is posing that question that no one has. That's what I would lead with. And then you can answer what you can answer. And then you first talk about how well you answer it, and then you talk about what's driving that answer to the most among the variables you have. I think that's a great paper. It's a storyline right there.
Yeah, I definitely see kind of the gap we are filling. I think that's pretty good. And I agree, nobody has really looked at the prior conditions and so on. So I think that's fine. Just the results part is kind of like, what does it help to include those? Yeah.
But the only one that's counterintuitive is the oil price one, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that the others are not major, like we know the central air, why is it not having a bigger effect? Right? But the
Yeah,
only
and
thing
the negative ones, I know you sent this paper that also finds a negative effect. I think that's okay because, there can be things going on, so that's not so problematic.
yeah.
Yeah, but maybe we should also leave Sarah, like give Sarah the chance to talk.
I can go late too if I can go late today if necessary, yeah.
I can go a bit late. Not very though. But other people? Are you okay?
Let's say 5 minutes, 11:05.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
So, Sarah, it's your chance to squeeze the allocated 5 minutes.
Oh, yes. I have been working with Dr. Carter on review for well-being measure framework in residential built environment. So I did extraction of well-being measures, and it's completed for our primary list of papers. And next we do about screening and sorting these well-being measures and indicator and see what we have. And for building object that I do with Dr. Bond, I am now doing some calibration for our estimate of heating energy requirements against the output of other simulation application like Energy Plus, and also output of RESTAC, and see if our estimate has a significant difference, or we could use these estimates as a basis for our work for these building objects. So I am doing this calibration. And also I want to say that the RESTAC also released a new version of their data set this week, and it provides a very huge sample comparing their previous version.
How big now?
Yes, it provides about 2 million building stock, comparing 500,000 for previous version.
This is NREL, RESTAC?
Yes, yes.
Oh, wow. What about the 9,000 synthetic households? That's different?
Mm,
9,000 was from Colorado. 550K was for the United
Ah,
States.
got it. So now it's 2 million instead.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Wow, okay.
Zara, do you know what changed?
I didn't check. I checked that they release it this week because they provide the information in last week webinar. So I intend to check and see what it's changed in comparing to previous versions. One thing that they mentioned in this new version, they use typical weather data comparing historical weather data in previous versions.
Okay. But still, so that affects your calibration a little bit.
Can you say a bit more how you, so if I understood correctly, you kind of built your own model to estimate the heating demand, and now you're validating that with RESTOC, like their data and Energy Plus.
Oh,
yes, or-
somehow this is a building object that they get its input from RESTAC building stacks. They have housing characteristics.
Mhm.
A big sample of housing characteristics for the whole nation. And we use some simplified method to estimate heating energy requirement, because they have energy consumption based on their simulation on OpenStudio and Energy Plus. So ours more simplified comparing them, and the output is something else.
Okay, so you're not using one of the tools like Energy Plus, you're basically implementing a couple of equations of like heat loss and whatever, and then you validate it with what they got. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting to see like how detailed you actually need to go, right? Like, yeah.
I think so some of the questions about like what's causing this, you have to go into it a little bit, which is why we're doing this intermediate. We're taking everything from RESTOC, like the insulation, because there's just a huge amount of variability in regional codes and construction that we didn't want to redo. But then there is this, so correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, that you're using the UA delta T calculation to get building energy. When they dump, it's hard to explain. So I think we would want to compare what would be the heating energy consumption with these different, with all different possibilities for the same home, right? And what RESTOC does is they assume a home has a certain heat pump or gas furnace, and then they just say, this is the electric energy that was used. So
Yes, exactly.
we're trying to calibrate against that for electric energy or things that don't have like a coefficient of performance to muck up the calculation further, to make sure that our calculation of heating energy is right. So we're trying to hit it in the middle. We're not actually doing anything highly novel. And so I'm trying to like go in, get out, but of course you don't go in, get out. It's really hard. So we're trying to get two things. I think one is the a sort of estimate of what a house in a particular region would use, but also a sense of the variability in that estimate, which we do by sampling. I think Zara showed this on a previous meeting. We do by sampling all the homes that match specified characteristics.
All right, I remember. But your equation is really taking into account the square floor space, the climate, and R value, basically. And you're seeing what R value you would need to, well, I mean, you have a distribution of floor space in the Restock data, and you have a distribution of R values as well for any given floor space range bucket.
Mm-hmm.
And are you trying to figure out how many archetypes to create for your model? Because that's a heterogeneity question in terms of the
No,
physical.
we're just sampling
You're sampling?
from the Restock.
Okay.
We're not trying to create archetypes. I think I had that idea in the first place, but I feel like just sampling from the Restock database, especially with this news, Sarah, about now they just dumped 2 million. I feel like they're moving and changing so fast, and we want to be in line with them. I'm kind of happy now with the method that we've chosen because they're adding improvements at a rate that we can't keep up with. And so I think your building object is actually a way to keep up with something that's very dynamic.
So what will your output look like after you sample from these? Will you end up, what will your output look like in terms of heating demand, for example?
You want to answer that, Sarah?
At this stage is just showing heating requirement, yes, and with additional information about what housing characteristics lead to this heating requirement based on Restock.
But can you say more about what heating demand for what?
It would be the heating demand at a particular set point, right? So that's
Like
an
hourly or
sorry?
hourly or for a day or like what's the time resolution?
Are you
or
doing it hourly, Zara?
Yes, this is based on annual data, yes.
No, but you're not calculating the annual, you're calculating it hourly and then summing it to annual or something, right?
Yes, the final equation is a summation of hourly difference between indoor and outdoor temperature coming from weather data, and then multiplying by UA value. U value that multiplying that area and find out.
For what unit? Like, what's the unit of analysis? You've got these 4 or 5 different attributes of buildings, right? You got the household size, the floor space, the climate, cooling degree days. So you have just a combination of those, and each one will have heating demand. Is that right?
So wait, maybe more what we're doing is we're taking, I'm not sure if this has been clear. So we're taking an instance of a building, or I mean, it could be the average floor space of an element in my cohort or something. So you feed in a floor space, building age, location, and it returns heating energy required. That's not heating energy used because there's an energy demand to keep the building at a consistent temperature. And then if there's a efficiency below 1 or a heat pump coefficient of performance or AFUE or whatever, then those feed into that. So it's just, I think it's just returning the building energy need that will be met by some piece of equipment. Does that make sense? Is that right, Zara?
Yes, it's a building envelope without considering separate thermal zones. It's whole building energy demand. If
Okay. You're picking up an instance, you have an underlying distribution, you're just looking up from it based on a given set of parameters about the building.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, but it does, it's kind of going into it's not just a R value, but it's the R value of the windows, floor and ceiling that are all at different codes. So then it comes up with an overall UA.
Mhm.
what I seen in my output is something that my building object overestimate this energy requirement for the building that are older. Perhaps it's related to their code of construction, but I haven't yet find any specific pattern.
It's overestimating by how much?
It's very significant.
Okay. And is there an internal gains problem?
Maybe I didn't check yet.
But that we wouldn't expect that to differ based on the building age.
Perhaps.
If it's useful to you, I think it'll be good to dedicate a part of the meeting just to look at that,
I agree.
your analysis, just to see what you're doing and what data you're using and what you're coming up with. I think it'll be useful.
Sounds
Yeah,
good.
I agree. And I think it needs more discussion. I'm not sure we're in the right middle place yet. I felt like we could not go with just the predicted energy demand that is communicated along with res stock, just because it would be split among different types of equipment. But there's a whole lot of, why did you do this? You know, why is this here instead of there? That's worth talking about.
Yeah, so whenever you like, if you want to make it half and half, no, you want to do the heterogeneity for the whole meeting, the next on 26th March, maybe the next one after that, you can dedicate to Zara's analysis, if that's
You want to do
useful.
that, Zara? I'd be happy to do that.
Yes, sounds good.
The first week of April, that Tuesday, whatever it is.
Okay.
Okay, I gotta run.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and definitely we'll flip it around next time. Sorry about squeezing you both.
Yeah,
Bye.
we just had to stop talking about like functions and programming and stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye, thanks.
Bye.